This is Overtime, the series which travels through time and space to bring you closer to the events of the past. Overtime originates from the University of Saskatchewan, produced by students for students of history. Tonight, we send our television cameras back to the early 1500s to get the inside story of an Italian military disaster.
The Condottieri and their mercenary horse companies are disunited, ambitious, without discipline, faithless, bold amongst friends, cowardly amongst enemies, with no fear of God and no faith with men.
I really resent that, you know, really! That's grounds for a duel!
But they're just businessmen, aren't they? What's wrong with that? At least we've got a job.
You fight, you wait to get paid. While you wait, you plunder to get by. Then you don't get paid near enough because your Condottieri captain has underbid on the contract.
Don't look at the men. Look at the weapons they were using. Gunpowder is changing the face of warfare and the way wars will be fought in the future.
I've heard the people's answer to a successful Condottieri. Let us kill him and then worship him as our patron saint.
Condottieri Exposé, an attempt to unravel a complex web of Renaissance intrigue. Here to introduce the story is Marianne Lorenzini.
Hi, and welcome to Overtime. Tonight's program is the story of military defeat, how early 16th century Italy, at the height of the Renaissance, became the military playground for the new monarchs of Europe. So, what happened? Why were the people of Italy unable to defend themselves? Our story is not about the wars themselves, but about the people who fought them, their values and traditions, their art and science. Finally, it is a story about mercenary soldiers, those men who for a fee will fight for any cause. We would like to thank Biagio Polidoro for putting this item together. Living at the time of Columbus, he quickly caught on to the television medium. A true Renaissance man.
All right. I see. You are now finishing up the setting up of the equipment?
Right.
All right. I look into the camera.
Right.
And my image is saved on tape?
Right.
To be played back later on a VRC.
No, a VCR.
VCR. VCR, yes. A wonderful medium to have my story told. But I'll bet my friend and fellow Florentine Leonardo has already thought of it.
I need a different angle on this.
A different angle? On my story?
No, a different camera angle.
A different camera angle. I'm well aware of perspective, yes. All right. One moment. Giovanni, some more wine, please. And then I'll begin. Thank you.
Stand by. 2, 1.
My nation is in the midst of war. This is not out of the ordinary, as we have been at war on and off for centuries. But this war is somehow different. It is fighting for keeps. There is death and destruction to an extent previously unknown. The Battle of Fornova in 1495, just 10 years ago last July, amazed my friend Guicciardini. He had not seen so much blood in 1 hour. German mercenaries, after the siege of Vicenza, set fires in front of caves where many of the town's inhabitants had taken refuge, until all of them, mostly women and children, were suffocated. While we have known ferocity in warfare before, this time it's disturbing because it comes from abroad. Let me explain. For the past few centuries, the states which make up the Italian peninsula have become a commercial beehive. Trade with the East in such things as spice have made our cities thrive and grow. Major centers Venice, Florence, Rome, and Naples have rediscovered and surpassed the glories of the classical Greeks and Romans. But now, upstart monarchs from outside Italy have cast their hungry eyes our way. Spain, with her New World gold, is very interested. And France, the King of France has cut across our borders. And the Swiss are storming over the Alps. And we can't stop them. Our military forces are failing miserably. Why the defeats of the Italian League by King Charles VIII of France and later his successor? It became my quest to find out. My first visit was to Antonio Gonzago, a diplomatic ambassador for the Republic of Florence and outspoken critic of the traditional Italian military.
So the results at Fornovo were no surprise. The Italian soldier is basically inferior to his barbarian rival. He is ineffectual at his best and unreliable at his worst. The blame lies on the Italian method of warfare, and in particular, the Condottieri.
Condottieri?
Mercenaries. Troops recruited by Condottieri commanders to fulfill a military contract or condotta. Instead of relying on a militia raised from amongst its own citizenry, a state relies on mercenary captains to provide its defense and exert itself on its neighbors.
And you feel militia are more effective?
Take the case of Venice. When its outlying possessions were attacked by the murderous Turks, locally raised militia, fighting to defend hearth and home, proved more than effective.
First off, I gotta quash this idea that somehow militia forces are superior to professional ones. It's simply not true.
The Condottieri Alessandro Vivarini had a different opinion.
We had militia in the past. In fact, we still got them. But what good are they? They're untrained, ripe for desertion, and definitely lacking in the thing in warfare today, the heavily armored mounted horsemen. Plus, in most Italian states, you got so many political factions. How are you going to get a group to fight for one cause?
What about Venice and the Turks?
Yeah. Well, oh, look, we're out there doing everyone a favor. Business has been very good here in Italy. Trade with the East. Now banks are bursting. Commercial activity that has created a whole group of get-ahead people who don't have time for picking up a pike every time their ruler, be a monarch or a Republican city councilor, asks them to. They hire a professional, a military businessman who uses their dependents or the restless elements in society to provide a military need. Let the people continue with the business of making money and leave the business of making war to the professionals.
I am a diplomat serving the illustrious Republic of Florence. And do you know what occupies a more than significant amount of my time? Checking up on the credentials of Condottieri captains to deliver up to their promises. Even those that are financially secure are a threat. They have no loyalties to anything except money and their own skins. And if they are clever, they will scheme for their own betterment, either by falling upon their employer or attacking states which were not to be provoked. And if they are not clever, they will most likely lose the battle for you.
I had been presented two pictures of the Condottieri, one as a commercial pioneer, and the other as, at worst, a possible charlatan, and at best, a treacherous threat to a gullible employer. What was the truth? Both sides seemed to have a personal stake in the argument. I needed to find a third party. I found someone who was more than willing to talk, but only at the right time and place. He asked that he not be identified. We will call him Ludovicio.
I would just like to remind you, I come here at no small risk to myself. I have to work with these people, and if I'm identified, I could be in trouble. So you see what I'm saying. This picture of the mercenary leader as a captain of industry is all fine and good, but there's another side, you see. There's the condottieri captain who would display his wares, and if no one was quick to hire, would force the reluctant buyer to bargain with some not so gentle persuasion. You have to be careful of the rose-colored glasses. Some novelists, like De Porto, present this image of the brave, courteous, love-smitten soldier, able to dash off a sonnet before engaging in the glories of combat. And this suited the self-image of courtiers in these guys just fine. But these romances only showed the ideal. The actual situation is very much different. Warfare is an uncertain and hazardous occupation. You fight, you wait to get paid. While you wait to get paid, you plunder to get by. Then you don't get paid near enough because your condottieri captain has underbid on the contract. Finally, after all that, you limp home to heal your wounds and cure the pox.
Look, you gotta realize that my position here is by no stretch of the imagination a secure one. Now, here's a not uncommon scenario. We get hired to give military support to some civilian leader, expand his territory, get rid of his enemies, capture a city or two. We make his position stronger. So strong that then he represents a definite danger to us that got him there in the first place.
That sounds like a catch-22.
Huh?
Mr. Polidoro, what my husband says is correct. A successful commander runs the risk of being put out of the way. The hero of the hour is later taken to be a threat, and his great exploits are rewarded with death. I have heard the people's answer to a successful condottieri. Let us kill him, and then worship him as our patron saint.
I would imagine you are pretty safe here. I mean, there is a saying, every man's home is his castle. And in your case, it seems to be the literal truth.
That only adds to what I'm saying.
Well, there's another point to be made. It is a precarious position being the wife of a condottieri. We are often used as hostages along with our children, sometimes for exceedingly long periods.
Only to endure the people's wrath. Tell them what happened to Katerina Sforza.
Caterina was a very powerful woman. She and her condottieri husband took over the castle St. Angelo, hoping to intimidate some church cardinals. After an uprising at Forti, during which her husband was assassinated, she and her 6 children were imprisoned and held hostage.
And now, get this, she escapes alone without the kids. And when confronted by the mob for leaving her children behind, she simply lifted up her skirts to indicate she'd give birth to more kids.
Once again, I found myself being led away from my question. I decided I must talk to others and make my way among the fields to ask the common people their opinions.
A peasant. Jacobo Sforza was a peasant just like me, but look how far he went. A more than capable military man raises himself up by his own bootstraps and fathers a whole line of condottieri leaders. But though he'd risen so high, still he treated his peasants well.
Italian Renaissance society is remarkably fluid for its time. The influx of wealth from trade and commerce had loosened the traditional social structure based on blood. This was especially true in the case of the Condottieri. But I wanted to find out how this rough fellow fitted into the military scheme of things.
As I am a groom, it all starts with this. On her back sits a heavily armed man, the man-at-arms or a lancer. He is the basic fighting unit of the Condottieri forces. Except he can't do it alone. He needs a man to look after him and his armor, plus one for the horse. Do you know how much a horse eats?
No.
25 to 30 pounds of forage a day, depending how heavy the soldier's armor is.
The groom Francesco had provided me with a clearer picture of what the Condottieri were. Heavily armed soldiers on horseback, with attendants, assembled and paid by a Condottieri leader, who would use these forces to do the bidding of an employer, either an individual or a state. And sometimes they would do some bidding of their own. But what of the forces which defeated them? These barbarians from the north. What sort of soldiers were they? My source of information was scholar Girolamo Maretto. Like me, he had studied the Studia Humanitatis, or standard art syllabus of grammar, history, poetry, rhetoric, and moral philosophy. As well, he was extremely knowledgeable in mathematics, astronomy, and anatomy. Like a growing number of scholars, he was discovering other Greeks besides Aristotle, men like Ptolemy, Galen, and Eureka, Archimedes. I should also mention that Maretto was the military engineer to the Marquis of Pescara, and he held a monopoly for saltpeter production in the Sienese territories. We discussed the little-known futuristic pennings of our mutual friend Leonardo da Vinci. Girolamo had his own answer to my query about the failure of the Italian defenders against the invaders from France, Spain, and the Alps.
Don't look at the men, look at the weapons they're using. Gunpowder is changing the face of warfare and the way wars will be fought in the future. At Foronova, French cannon decimated the armies of the Italian League. They used iron balls instead of stone bombards, tighter fitting, which increases their power and accuracy. Makes for a very destructive weapon. However, there is a defense. Stronger cannon are forcing engineers to rethink castle design. These new ones are best called fortresses. These are the latest trends. Walls are angled and heavily bagged with earth to decrease the effective impact of cannon fire. At the top of the wall is a rampart, wide enough to accommodate artillery placement. Rounded corner towers are replaced with solid bastions, large enough for heavy guns, and which are pointed to eliminate the dead ground in front. However, these towers still allow enfilading or crossfire. But it will take time. Time, energy, and commitment to implement these sorts of changes. And in the meantime, small arms and artillery are extremely effective against mounted forces. Now take a look at this.
Girolamo's explanation helped to explain the success of the northern forces, but not the failure of the Italian states. I couldn't help feeling that his argument overemphasized the impact of technology. There had to be a human side as well.
The Condottieri and their mercenary horse companies are disunited, ambitious, without discipline, faithless, bold amongst friends, cowardly amongst enemies, with no fear of God and no faith with men.
What about their noted exploits in the field prior to the recent invasions?
What? The Battle of Zaganara, for instance?
Yes.
A victory famous throughout Italy, where no one was killed except Ludovico degli Obisi and two companions who were thrown from their horses and suffocated in the mud. At Anghiara, only one man was killed, and he wasn't struck down with a valiant blow. He fell from his horse and was trampled to death. They fight so badly because their sole interest in war is making money. Since soldiers are working capital, the Condottieri doesn't want to waste them. So he avoids confrontation and adopts a war of maneuver.
Italy's mixture of rugged and marshy terrain must facilitate that.
In fact, I am convinced that Condottieri are so concerned with expenses and their continued long-term employment that they often feign warfare.
Hold on a minute. Are you saying that Condottieri captains sometimes just fake it?
That's what I'm saying. Are these the type of military men to entrust with our security? A militia raised from amongst the populace with some sort of stake in things is the only way.
I really resent that, really. That's grounds for a duel. But I'm going to deal with this in a civilized manner. I'm going to prove to him from his own book that there are numerous members of the Condottieri Hall of Fame. He writes about them. He's just very keen about this militia idea of his. But I'll show you. He doesn't always talk us down. Where is that book?
On the table in the hall.
Right. As he went to find ammunition for his argument, I reflected on Francesco's opinions.
My opinion on the Condottieri. Some bad, some good. But they're just businessmen, aren't they? What's wrong with that? At least we've got a job. Militia, it will never catch on. It's too Republican. Who's going to risk their life when they've been in the habit of hiring others to risk it for them? Anyway, the upper classes won't permit it. Arm the common man? It's too dangerous.
While Francesco seemed convinced of the longevity of the Condottieri, I remembered Ludovicio's comments about their future prospects.
Me, I'm moving on. The Condottieri are finished. Don't get me wrong. The days of the mercenary are far from over. But heavy horse, no way. I'm joining up with that Spaniard, Cordoba. Infantry with light horse. He uses the pike formations of the Swiss and German, the firepower of the arquebusiers, plus artillery and gunpowder mines for any stubborn walls. Shock troops. That's the latest. And from what I've heard, Spain has the money to pay for them.
A remark made by Caterina Vivarini brought me back from my thoughts.
So what if it's true? So what if they fake it sometimes?
Are you acknowledging then that they do?
Well, who gets hurt by it? I don't suppose you call this latest demonstration of military might the way to fight wars?
Is there a way to fight war?
Well, I would say that the Condottieri captains have one, even if it includes pulling a few punches now and again. Being a successful warrior is only one aspect of being a successful Renaissance person. An appreciation of good books and tasteful art is also important. Sigismondo Malatesta, a condottieri of insatiable appetites, begins one of his poems. The five senses I have acutely: to hear, to see, to smell, to taste, to touch. Everything voluptuous and beautiful in life. What do we see in these senseless barbarians? Death and destruction. The troops of Charles VIII actually kill their enemies. Can you imagine the tragedy of being struck down and unable to fight again when the Belle Guerre was at its peak?
Rita, where did you say that book was?
On the table in the hall. Isn't he a sweetheart?
Vivarini finally found his book. And yes, indeed, Gonzago had written favorably about certain Condottieri commanders, and at the same time, criticizing others. What am I to conclude? I realize that, more than anything, the Condottieri are a product of our age. The fact that, at times, their warfare resembles business affairs rather than military affairs reflects upon the commercial aspect of Renaissance society. That they were deceptive simply reflects upon the foibles of humanity.
The influx of wealth from trade and commerce had loosened the traditional social structure based on blood. This was especially true in the case of the Condottieri.
Do I really sound like that?
Yes, you do.
Hi.
Well, here's your story.
This is my story?
That's it.
Did you get everything you wanted?
Yes, I have my story on tape.
Good.
But I also have it here. You take this. I have nothing to play it on anyway.
Thanks.
Ciao.